David had always been the kind of person who had everything figured out. At 34 years old, he worked as a marketing director at a big company in Chicago. His life ran like clockwork. Wake up at 6, gym by 6:30, shower, suit, coffee, and out the door by 8. No surprises. No mistakes. That's how he liked it. This particular Tuesday morning felt no different. David stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his navy blue tie for the third time. Today was huge. He had a presentation that could land his company a multi-million-dollar client. He'd been preparing for 3 weeks straight, staying late at the office, running through slides until his eyes burned. This was his moment to shine. He grabbed his briefcase, checked his phone, and rushed out of his apartment. The elevator took forever, as usual. He tapped his foot impatiently, mentally rehearsing his opening lines. The numbers lit up one by one. Ground floor, finally. The Chicago streets were already buzzing with morning traffic. Cars honked. People rushed past with their heads down, lost in their own worlds. David joined the river of suits and briefcases flowing toward the business district. His mind was racing through the presentation, the statistics, the graphics, the closing pitch. Everything had to be perfect. 3 blocks from his office, he spotted his usual coffee shop, the small place with the green awning and the smell of fresh roasted beans that hit you half a block away. David had been going there for 2 years. Same time, same order. The staff knew him by face, though he'd never bothered to learn their names. He was always too busy, too focused on the next meeting, the next deadline. The bell above the door jingled as he walked in. 2 people stood in line ahead of him. Good. He had time. David pulled out his phone and checked his emails. A message from his boss. Good luck today. We're counting on you. No pressure there. Next, please. David looked up. The girl behind the counter was smiling at him. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. He'd seen her here before. She was always friendly, always smiling, even during the morning rush when customers got impatient. Double espresso, please, David said, already reaching for his back pocket. His hand found nothing but fabric. He frowned and tried his other pocket. Empty. He patted his jacket pockets. Nothing. His chest tightened. No, 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 no. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Is everything okay? The girl asked, her smile fading into concern. David's mind flashed back to his apartment. He'd made breakfast, unusual for him. Toast and eggs. He'd set his wallet on the kitchen counter while he ate, scrolling through his phone with one hand. He'd been so focused on reading the news that he'd forgotten to pick it up again. I left my wallet at home, David said, feeling his face get hot. People behind him in line shifted their weight. Someone sighed. He could feel their impatience like a physical pressure on his back. I'm so sorry, he continued, already backing away from the counter. I'll just come back later. I'm sorry for holding up the line. Wait, the girl said. She was already pouring his espresso into a cup. It's okay. Don't worry about it, David stopped. What? The coffee? It's on me. She slid the cup across the counter toward him with that same warm smile. Everyone has those days, right? Where everything feels off from the start. I can't let you do that, David protested, even though he really wanted that coffee. I'll come back and pay you. I promise, I know you will, she said. But right now you look like you really need this coffee. And honestly, kindness doesn't cost me anything. So please take it. David stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. In his world, everything was a transaction. You paid for what you got. Nobody just gave things away, especially not to strangers. But this girl was looking at him with such genuine kindness that he felt something crack inside his usual walls. Thank you, he managed. Really, thank you so much. You're welcome. Hope your day gets better. David took the coffee and walked out, but her words stayed with him. Hope your day gets better. When was the last time someone had said something like that to him? When was the last time he'd really talked to another person? Not just exchanged information, but actually connected. He pushed the thought away. He didn't have time for philosophy. He had a presentation to nail. The office building loomed ahead, all glass and steel reflecting the morning sun. David took the elevator to the 15th floor, nodding at people he recognized but didn't really know. His office was a corner space with a view of the city. Normally, he loved that view. It made him feel successful, important. Today, he barely glanced at it. He set down his briefcase and immediately started panicking about the wallet situation. No wallet meant no ID badge for the parking garage later. No credit cards for lunch. No train pass to get home. His whole day was about to become incredibly complicated. David called his assistant. "Hey, Rachel, I need a favor. I left my wallet at home. Can you cover me for lunch today? I'll pay you back tomorrow." "Of course," Rachel said without hesitation. "No problem at all." Another act of kindness. 2 in 1 morning. David felt uncomfortable accepting help. He was the person who had it together, who helped others who never needed anything from anyone. The morning crawled by. David tried to focus on his presentation, but his mind kept drifting back to that coffee shop. To the girl who'd bought him coffee without expecting anything in return. He'd walked into that shop hundreds of times, ordered the same thing, paid and left. Had he ever even said thank you? Really said it with meaning? Or had he just been going through the motions, another transaction in a day full of transactions? At 11 o'clock, his boss stopped by his office. "Ready for the big presentation?" "Absolutely," David said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Good man. Conference room 2 at 1 o'clock. The clients will be here at 12:30. I want you there to greet them." The presentation went well. Actually, it went better than well. The clients loved the pitch. They laughed at David's jokes, nodded at his statistics, and asked all the right questions. By 3 o'clock, they were shaking hands and talking about next steps. David should have felt on top of the world, but he didn't. As he walked back to his office, he felt strangely empty. He'd landed a huge account. His boss had clapped him on the shoulder and told him there'd be a bonus in this. Everything had gone according to plan. So why did he feel like something was missing? His phone buzzed. A text from his friend Jason. "Can you get yourself home or do you need a ride? Just remembered you mentioned the wallet thing." David smiled. 3 acts of kindness in one day. The coffee girl, Rachel, covering lunch, and now Jason offering to drive across town to help him out. When had people become so generous? Or had they always been this way? And he'd just been too busy to notice. He texted back. "A ride would be great." "Thanks, man. No problem. I'll be there at 5:30. David sat in his office watching the sun start to sink lower in the sky. The city stretched out below him. Millions of people going about their lives. How many of them were helping each other right now? How many small acts of kindness were happening every single moment? And how many had he missed because he was too focused on himself? For the first time in years, David felt like he was waking up from a long sleep. His forgotten wallet had stripped away his self-sufficiency, forced him to depend on others. And instead of the world falling apart, people had stepped up. They'd helped him without hesitation, without keeping score. Maybe, David thought, he'd been living his life all wrong. Maybe success wasn't about being independent and self-sufficient. Maybe it was about being connected, about being part of something bigger than himself. The thought scared him a little. But it also felt like opening a door he didn't know existed. His whole life was about to change. He just didn't know it yet. The rest of that Tuesday unfolded like a strange dream. David had built his entire adult life around being prepared, being in control, being the person who never needed help. Now without his wallet, he felt like he was walking through the world naked. After the successful presentation, he should have taken the clients out for drinks. That was the protocol. Seal the deal with some expensive whiskey and corporate bonding. Instead, he had to watch his boss do it while he made excuses about a prior commitment. The look of surprise on his boss's face stung. David never turned down FaceTime with clients. "You feeling all right?" His boss had asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Yeah, just something I can't get out of," David lied. The truth felt too embarrassing. How do you tell your boss that you can't take clients to drinks because you forgot your wallet like some disorganized college kid? By 4 o'clock, David's stomach was growling. Rachel had covered his lunch, but he'd only grabbed a sandwich from the office cafeteria. Nothing substantial. He usually hit the coffee shop again around this time for an afternoon pick-me-up and maybe a pastry. Today he sat at his desk, thirsty and hungry, too proud to ask for help again. Jason texted at 5. "Running a few minutes late. Traffic is crazy. Be there by 6. David looked around his office. Normally he'd work until 6 or 7 anyway, but today every minute felt longer. He couldn't focus. He pulled up spreadsheets and stared at numbers that refused to make sense. His mind kept wandering back to the morning, to the coffee shop girl's smile, to how easy it had been for her to help a stranger. He found himself wondering about her. Did she always do things like that? Give away free coffee to forgetful customers? The shop probably didn't pay much. She'd basically given him money out of her own pocket. And she'd done it with such warmth, like it was the most natural thing in the world. David tried to remember the last time he'd done something like that, helped someone without calculating what he'd get in return. He came up empty. At 6:15, Jason texted that he was downstairs. David grabbed his briefcase and headed for the elevator. The building was quieter now, most people already gone for the day. His footsteps echoed in the marble lobby. Jason's car was idling at the curb, hazard lights blinking. David slid into the passenger seat with a sigh of relief. Long day, Jason asked, pulling into traffic. "You have no idea," David said. Then he laughed. Actually, it was weird. Really weird. Weird how? David told him about the coffee, about Rachel covering lunch, about having to skip drinks with the clients. As he talked, he realized how small these problems were. He'd forgotten his wallet. That was it. Nothing tragic, nothing life-changing. And yet the whole day had felt different. Off balance, uncomfortable. "Sounds like you survived, though," Jason said. "World didn't end because you had to ask for help." David looked out the window at the passing streets. "No, I guess it didn't." They drove in silence for a while. Chicago traffic moved in fits and starts. Stop, go, stop, go. David usually spent this time checking emails on his phone, but today he just watched the city, really looked at it. The people waiting at bus stops. The street vendor selling hot dogs on the corner. The kid on a skateboard weaving between pedestrians. "You want to grab dinner?" Jason asked. "I'm buying since you're broke." David almost said no. He wanted to get home, grab his wallet, restore his sense of control. But something made him say yes instead. Maybe it was hunger. Maybe it was something else. They ended up at a small Thai place Jason loved. The kind of restaurant David usually avoided because it didn't take reservations and the wait could be long. They put their name in and stood outside with a dozen other people waiting for a table. David checked his watch. 6:45. Normally, he'd be annoyed by the wait. Time was money. Efficiency was everything. But tonight, leaning against the brick wall with Jason, watching people come and go, he felt oddly calm. "You seem different today," Jason said. "Different how?" "I don't know. Quieter, maybe. Less intense." David thought about that. "I feel different. It's stupid. All I did was forget my wallet. But it's like everything got flipped around." "Maybe it's good," Jason said. "You're always so wound up. Always chasing the next thing. When's the last time you just relaxed?" David couldn't remember. His life was scheduled down to 15-minute increments. Exercise, work, meetings, networking events. Even his social life was planned and optimized. He had a calendar reminder to call his mom every Sunday at 7. How sad was that? Their table was ready. They sat in a corner booth with red vinyl seats that had seen better days. The menu was extensive, overwhelming. David usually knew exactly what he wanted everywhere. Tonight, he felt paralyzed by choices. "Get the pad thai," Jason suggested. "Trust me," so David did. He let someone else make the decision. The world didn't end. The food came fast and hot, steam rising from the plates. David took a bite and realized he was starving. Really, truly hungry in a way he usually never let himself be. He was always grabbing protein bars between meetings, eating lunch at his desk, planning his meals around his macros and his schedule. "This is incredible," he said. Jason grinned. "Told you. I've been trying to get you to come here for 2 years. 2 years. David felt a pang of guilt. How many times had Jason invited him places and he'd been too busy, too focused on work, too concerned with maintaining his perfect, controlled life? "I'm sorry," David said. "For what?" "For being a lousy friend. For always being too busy. For making everything about work." Jason looked surprised. "Where's this coming from?" "I don't know. Forgetting my wallet, I guess. It made me realize how disconnected I've been. From everything. From everyone." They talked through dinner, really talked in a way they hadn't in months. Jason told him about trouble he was having with his girlfriend. About thinking of switching jobs. About feeling stuck in life. David listened. Actually listened instead of half paying attention while thinking about work. "You should talk to her," David said about the girlfriend situation. "Really talk. Tell her what you told me." "Yeah, maybe," Jason said. "When did you get wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just starting to pay attention." After dinner, Jason drove him home. David's apartment building rose up against the night sky, all modern glass and steel. He'd paid a fortune for this place. Top floor. City views. It was supposed to represent success. Tonight it just looked lonely. "Thanks for the ride," David said. "And dinner. I owe you. Don't worry about it. What are friends for?" David went up to his apartment and there it was, exactly where he'd left it that morning. His wallet. Sitting on the kitchen counter next to his coffee maker. Brown leather worn at the edges, stuffed with credit cards and cash and receipts. He picked it up, felt the familiar weight in his hand. His whole day had been derailed by leaving this behind. And yet had it been derailed? Or had it actually been the most real, most human day he'd had in years? David walked to his window and looked out at the city. Lights stretched in every direction. Millions of lives happening simultaneously. People helping each other, hurting each other, living, really living. He thought about tomorrow. He'd go back to that coffee shop and pay for his coffee. He'd thank that girl properly. And maybe, just maybe, he'd slow down enough to learn her name. To see her as a person instead of just someone who served him coffee. David's phone buzzed. A text from his boss. "Great work today. The clients were very impressed. Let's talk about your bonus tomorrow." A month ago, that text would have made his whole week. Tonight, he felt nothing. The bonus was nice. The client was great, but none of it filled the empty space inside him that had been growing for years. He sat on his couch in the dark, wallet in hand, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, David wondered if he'd been chasing the wrong things all along. Success, money, promotions, recognition. He had all of it, or most of it anyway. But what did he actually have? A nice apartment he was barely ever in, a job that consumed his life, a calendar full of meetings with people whose names he'd forget in a week. What he didn't have were real connections, real friendships, real purpose beyond climbing the corporate ladder. David thought about the coffee shop girl again. She probably made minimum wage or close to it. She probably worried about rent and bills. But she'd given away coffee with a smile because kindness doesn't cost anything. She'd said that. Kindness doesn't cost anything. When was the last time David had been kind just for the sake of being kind? Not networking kind. Not strategic kind. Just human kind. He couldn't think of a single instance. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd become so focused on success that he'd forgotten to be a decent human being. He'd optimized his life so thoroughly that he'd optimized out all the things that actually mattered. David set his wallet on the coffee table and stared at it. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary thing. But forgetting it had cracked something open inside him and now he couldn't close it again. Didn't want to close it. Tomorrow, he decided, would be different. He didn't know how yet. Didn't know what different looked like. But he knew he couldn't go back to sleepwalking through his life. Treating every interaction like a transaction. Every person like a stepping stone to something better. The city lights glittered outside his window. Somewhere out there, the coffee shop girl was probably home now. Maybe she lived with roommates. Maybe she was making dinner or watching TV or doing the 1,000 ordinary things that made up a life. David hoped she knew that her small act of kindness had started something. That buying a stranger coffee had planted a seed in soil that had been dry and hard for far too long. He went to bed that night with his mind racing, unable to settle. Everything felt different now. The same apartment, the same bed, the same life, but different. Like seeing everything for the first time. Sleep didn't come easy. David lay in the dark listening to the city sounds outside his window. Sirens, car horns, the distant rumble of the train. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow everything changes. He just had to figure out how. Wednesday morning came too fast. David's alarm went off at 6 like always, but he hit snooze for the first time in months. When he finally dragged himself out of bed, his usual routine felt hollow. The gym, the shower, the suit, all of it just motions he went through without thinking. But this time he grabbed his wallet from the kitchen counter. Checked twice. Slipped it into his pocket where it belonged. The coffee shop was busier than yesterday. David stood in line, wallet ready, rehearsing what he wanted to say. "Thank you for the coffee. You really helped me out, simple, direct." But when he got to the counter, a different person was working. A guy with tattoos up his arms and a beard. "What can I get you?" the guy asked. Double espresso," David said, looking around. "Is the girl who usually works mornings here?" "Ponytail, really friendly." "Oh, you mean Lily?" "Nah, she quit yesterday. Family emergency or something." David felt like he'd been punched. "She quit?" "Yeah, pretty sudden. Said she had to take care of her mom, needed something with flexible hours. The guy shrugged. Shame, she was cool. David paid for his coffee in a daze. He'd wanted to thank her, to tell her that her kindness had meant something. And now she was just gone. Disappeared into the city's millions of people. He didn't even know her last name. The coffee tasted bitter today. Work dragged on. Meetings, emails, phone calls. The same stuff that had always filled his days, but now it all felt pointless. David caught himself staring out the window, watching clouds drift across the sky. His assistant knocked on his door at 3. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked. "You seem distracted." "Yeah, just thinking." "Well, your 4 o'clock got canceled." The Henderson account pushed to Friday. Suddenly, David had a free afternoon. When was the last time that happened? He looked at his calendar, at all the carefully scheduled blocks of time. For once, there was a gap. An empty space, thanks, Rachel. "I think I'm going to take off early." She looked shocked. "You? Leave early? Crazy, right?" David grabbed his jacket and left the office at 3:30. The afternoon sun felt different than the morning rush. Warmer, softer. People on the street moved slower. Parents pushed strollers. Old couples walked arm in arm. The whole rhythm of the city was different. He found himself walking with no destination in mind. Just walking. His feet carried him away from the business district, through neighborhoods he normally only saw from taxi windows. Small shops, restaurants with tables outside. A park he didn't know existed. The park wasn't much. Just a few benches, some trees, a patch of grass that had seen better days. But it was green and quiet, a pocket of calm in the middle of the city's chaos. David sat on a bench and loosened his tie. Next to him, an older man was feeding pigeons from a paper bag. The birds flocked around his feet, cooing and pecking at the breadcrumbs he scattered. The man talked to them softly like they were old friends. "Beautiful day," the man said without looking up. "Yeah," David agreed. "It is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The man kept feeding his birds. David watched office workers cut through the park, heads down, glued to their phones. He'd been one of them just yesterday. Was he still? "You look troubled, young man," the old man said. David laughed. "Is it that obvious? I've been watching people for 72 years. You learn to read faces." The man turned to look at David properly. He had kind eyes, weathered skin, and a smile that seemed to come easy. "Want to talk about it?" Normally, David would have said no, would have made an excuse and left. Strangers didn't share problems with strangers. But something about this man, about the quiet park, about the whole strange week made him open up. "I forgot my wallet yesterday," David started. Then the whole story spilled out. The coffee shop. The kindness of strangers. The feeling that his whole life was built on the wrong foundation. The man listened without interrupting, occasionally tossing bread to his birds. "And now the girl from the coffee shop is gone, and I never got to thank her properly," David finished. "Isn't that stupid? Getting this worked up over a cup of coffee?" The old man smiled. "It's not about the coffee, son. It's never about the coffee." "What do you mean?" "I'm Walter, by the way," the man said, extending a weathered hand. "Retired high school teacher. Taught history for 40 years. David shook his hand. "David, marketing director, though right now I'm questioning everything about my life." Walter laughed, a deep, warm sound. "Good. Means you're paying attention." He scattered the last of his bread and the pigeons scattered with it off to find their next meal. "You want to hear a story?" "Sure. 15 years ago, I was a lot like you. Not in marketing, but same energy. Always busy. Always stressed. Always chasing the next thing. I taught. I coached basketball. I ran the debate team. I was important, you know. Made a difference. Or so I thought." Walter paused, watching the pigeons strut around the grass. "Then one day I'm in New York for a teaching conference. Big fancy hotel. Important speakers. Networking opportunities. And what do? I forget my wallet in my hotel room. Can't get back in because I gave the key to my roommate who went sightseeing." David leaned forward. "What happened?" "I was stuck. Couldn't buy lunch. Couldn't get into the conference because my badge was in my wallet. Couldn't do anything except walk around the city. So that's what I did. I walked, and something amazing happened." "What?" "I slowed down enough to actually see things. See people. I sat in parks like this one. I talked to strangers. I helped a lady carry her groceries up 4 flights of stairs. I spent an hour listening to a street musician play violin, and somewhere in all that I realized something. Walter turned to look at David directly. I'd spent 25 years teaching kids about history, about the past, about people who made a difference. But I'd forgotten to actually live, to be present, to connect with the world right in front of me. I was so busy being important that I forgot to be human. The words hit David like a hammer. That was exactly it. Exactly what he'd been feeling but couldn't name. "So what did you do?" David asked. "I went home and changed everything. Not all at once. Small steps. I started really talking to my students instead of just lecturing at them. I volunteered at a soup kitchen on Saturdays. I learned my neighbors' names. I sat in parks and fed pigeons." Walter grinned. "Sounds simple, right? Maybe even boring. But it saved my life. Saved your life. From being wasted. See, you can have a successful career and still waste your life. Success and meaning aren't the same thing. Success is what you get. Meaning is what you give." David sat back, his mind racing. Success is what you get. Meaning is what you give. "The girl at the coffee shop," Walter continued. "She gave you more than coffee. She gave you a moment of pure kindness. No agenda, no strings attached. Just one human helping another. And it cracked something open in you. Made you question everything. That's the gift. But I never thanked her. So thank someone else. Pay it forward, as they say. The kindness doesn't need to circle back to her. It just needs to keep moving through the world." They sat together as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Walter told stories about his students, about the lives he'd touched and the lives that had touched him. David listened, really listened, in a way he couldn't remember doing before. "You know what the secret is?" Walter said eventually. "To a good life? What?" "It's not about having resources. Money, connections, power, all that stuff. It's about having purpose. Knowing why you get up in the morning beyond just making money or climbing ladders. And how do you find purpose?" Walter smiled. "Usually by accident. Usually when you're not looking for it. Like forgetting your wallet and having to slow down enough to notice the world." A woman walked by with a dog, a small terrier that yapped at the remaining pigeons. They flew up in a cloud of wings and settled on a nearby tree branch. "I should probably go," David said, though he didn't want to. This conversation felt important. Real. Like something he'd been missing his whole adult life. "You know where to find me," Walter said. "I'm here most afternoons. Pigeons keep a regular schedule." David stood and extended his hand again. "Thank you, Walter. Really, this helped more than you know. That's what people are for, son. Helping each other. You'll figure it out." David walked home slowly, taking side streets he'd never explored. The city looked different at this hour. Softer. More human. He passed a small bookstore and went inside on impulse. When was the last time he'd bought a book that wasn't for work? He browsed the shelves, running his fingers along worn spines. Finally grabbed one about finding purpose in work. The irony wasn't lost on him. At the register, a teenager rang him up. His name tag said Chris, and he had headphones around his neck. "Good choice," Chris said. "This book changed my mom's life. She was totally burned out at her job, and this helped her figure out what she actually wanted to do." "Yeah? What did she do?" "She was a lawyer. Now she teaches art to kids. Makes way less money, but she's actually happy now, you know?" David thought about that as he walked home. Actually happy. When was the last time he could say that about himself? He was successful. He was respected. He was well paid. But happy? Actually happy? That night, David sat in his expensive apartment with his new book and his old questions. The book talked about legacy, about impact, about the difference between a career and a calling. He thought about Lily at the coffee shop, quitting to take care of her mother. That was purpose. Immediate, clear human purpose. She was needed, and she answered the call, even though it probably meant financial stress and uncertainty. He thought about Walter, feeding pigeons and talking to strangers. Finding meaning in small moments, in connections, in being present. And he thought about himself. What was his purpose? Beyond making money, beyond impressing his boss, beyond climbing to the next rung on the ladder. David didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time in years he was asking the right questions. He opened his laptop and started typing. Not work emails, not presentation notes, just thoughts, questions, ideas. What if he used his marketing skills for something that mattered? What if success wasn't the goal but the tool? What if he stopped chasing and started building? The words flowed faster than they had in years. David wrote until midnight, until his eyes burned and his fingers ached. He wrote about the life he'd been living and the life he wanted to live. About the person he'd become and the person he wanted to be. When he finally closed his laptop, exhausted but weirdly energized, David looked out at the city lights and smiled. Tomorrow, he'd go back to that park. Talk to Walter again. Maybe bring bread for the pigeons. Keep asking questions. Keep paying attention. The wallet sitting on his counter had taught him something valuable. Sometimes you have to lose something to find what really matters. Sometimes being helpless opens you up to help. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness can crack open a life that's been closed for far too long. David went to bed that night feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. David woke up Thursday with a sense of mission he hadn't felt in years. Not the usual work mission, the kind that came from deadlines and quotas and performance reviews. This was different, personal, real. He went to the coffee shop again, hoping maybe Lily had come back. Maybe the family emergency had resolved itself. But the same tattooed guy was behind the counter and there was no sign of her. "You looking for Lily again?" the guy asked. "Yeah," David admitted. "I wanted to thank her for something." "You don't happen to have a way to contact her, do you?" The guy hesitated. "I mean, I can't just give out her number. Privacy and all that." "Right, of course. That was stupid of me to ask." David ordered his coffee, paid, and stood there feeling foolish. Then an idea hit him. "What if I left you my number? You could pass it to her. Tell her it's the guy whose coffee she paid for on Tuesday. I just want to say thanks," the guy shrugged. "Yeah, I can do that. No promises she'll call, though." David wrote his number on a napkin and left it on the counter. It felt like a long shot, but at least he'd tried. Work felt different that day. David went through the motions, but his heart wasn't in it. During a budget meeting, while his colleagues argued about quarterly projections, he found himself thinking about what Walter had said. Success is what you get. Meaning is what you give. What was he giving? Presentations? Marketing strategies? Profits for shareholders who didn't know his name? At lunch, instead of eating at his desk like usual, David went to the park. Walter was there on the same bench feeding the same pigeons. "You came back," Walter said with a smile. "Told you I would." David sat down. "I've been thinking about what you said. About purpose, and I don't know what mine is. I've been so focused on climbing the ladder that I never stopped to ask where the ladder is going." Walter tossed some bread to a particularly bold pigeon. "That's the first step. Admitting you don't know. Most people never get that far. They just keep climbing until they retire, then wonder why they feel empty. So how do I figure it out? You already are. You're here, aren't you? You're asking questions. You're paying attention. The rest will come." They talked for an hour. David told Walter about trying to find Lily, about wanting to thank her properly. Walter listened, nodding along. "You know what I think?" Walter said. "I think you're looking for permission." "Permission for what?" "To change. To be different. To use your skills for something that matters to you instead of just what pays the bills." Walter fixed him with a serious look. "Nobody's going to give you that permission, David. You have to give it to yourself." That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. His phone sat on the nightstand, silent. Lily hadn't called. She probably wouldn't. Why would she? She'd done a nice thing for a stranger and moved on with her life. She had her own problems to deal with. But David couldn't shake the feeling that there was a thread here, a connection he was meant to follow. Not with Lily specifically, but with what she represented. Kindness without agenda, helping without expectation, being human instead of transactional. Friday morning, David's phone rang while he was getting ready for work. Unknown number. "Hello? Hi, is this David?" A woman's voice, young, uncertain. His heart jumped. "Yes, is this Lily?" "Yeah. Tom from the coffee shop gave me your number. Said you wanted to talk to me." David felt suddenly nervous, like a teenager. "Yes, I just wanted to thank you for the coffee on Tuesday. It might sound weird, but that small thing you did kind of changed my whole week." Lily laughed, surprised. "Really, it was just coffee." "I know, but I'd forgotten my wallet, and I was stressed about this big presentation, and you were just so kind about it. No judgment, no hesitation, just genuine kindness. It made me realize I'd been living my life all wrong." There was a pause. "That's pretty deep for a cup of coffee. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm serious. Tom said you had to quit because of a family situation. I hope everything's okay. Lily sighed. Yeah, my mom got sick. She needs someone around more, and the coffee shop couldn't give me flexible hours. I'm trying to find work I can do from home, but it's tough. What kind of work? I studied graphic design in college, but all the jobs I find are either full-time in an office or freelance gigs that don't pay enough. I'm kind of stuck. David's mind started racing. Graphic design. Flexible hours. He thought about his company, about all the design work they outsourced to expensive agencies. What if there was another way? Can I ask you something? Do you have a portfolio of your design work? Yeah, I have a website. Why? Would you send it to me? I might have an idea. They talked for another 10 minutes. Lily seemed skeptical but willing to hear him out. After they hung up, David sat on his couch, his coffee getting cold, an idea forming in his mind. At work, David scheduled a meeting with his boss for that afternoon. Usually he only met with him for quarterly reviews or big presentations. This felt different, riskier. What's on your mind? His boss asked when David sat down in his office. I've been thinking about our design budget. We spend a fortune outsourcing to agencies. His boss nodded. True, but they do good work. They do. But what if we could get the same quality for less money and also do something good at the same time? I'm listening. David took a breath. What if we started a freelance program? Hire talented designers who need flexible work arrangements. People like new parents, caregivers, students. Give them contract work at fair rates. We'd save money versus the agencies. They'd get income and flexibility, and we'd be doing something meaningful. His boss leaned back in his chair, thinking. That's actually not a bad idea. But who would manage it? Vet the freelancers? Coordinate the projects? I would. As an addition to my current role, at least to start. Get it up and running, prove the concept works. Why? His boss asked bluntly. What's in it for you? This would be a lot of extra work. David had been asking himself the same question all morning. The old answer would have been career advancement. Looking good to upper management, another bullet point on his resume. But that wasn't it. Not anymore, honestly. Because it matters. Because I've been doing work that makes money but doesn't make a difference. And I want to do both. His boss studied him for a long moment. You've been different this week. Since that big presentation. More focused somehow, but also more distracted. What's going on with you? I forgot my wallet on Tuesday, David said. And it sounds insane, but that one small thing made me realize I'd been sleepwalking through my life. Just going through motions. I want to do work that means something. To David's surprise, his boss smiled. You know, I felt exactly the same way at your age. Then I had kids and forgot about it. Got caught up in mortgages and college funds and climbing the ladder. He paused. But I remember that feeling. That hunger for purpose. So what do you think? About the freelance program? Write me a proposal. Real numbers. Projected savings. Management plan. If it makes financial sense and you're willing to drive it, I'll take it to the executive team. David worked all weekend on the proposal. Not the half-hearted weekend work he usually did. Answering emails from his couch while watching TV. Real work. Focused work. He researched freelance rates, calculated cost comparisons, mapped out onboarding processes, drafted project management workflows. Saturday afternoon, he took a break and went to the park. Walter was there, as always, with his bag of bread and his patient pigeons. You look energized, Walter observed. David told him about Lily, about the freelance program idea, about his boss's cautiously positive response, see? Walter said. You found your thread. Now you just have to follow it. What if it doesn't work? What if the executives say no? Then you'll find another thread. Purpose isn't one thing, David. It's a practice. A way of moving through the world. You keep looking for ways to give, to help, to make things better. Sometimes they work out. Sometimes they don't. But you keep trying. Sunday evening, David emailed Lily asking if she'd be willing to be a test case for the program. If his proposal got approved, would she want to be one of the first freelancers they hired? Her response came within an hour. Are you serious? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Monday morning, David submitted his proposal to his boss. Then he waited. Waiting had never been his strong suit, but this felt different. He wasn't waiting for a promotion or a bonus. He was waiting to see if he could actually do something meaningful. The response came Wednesday. A meeting invitation from his boss. freelance program discussion with 3 executives he'd never met with before. David's hands shook as he prepared his presentation. This wasn't like the client pitch from last week. This mattered in a different way. This was personal. The meeting started rough. The executives peppered him with hard questions. What about quality control? Legal issues with contractors? Insurance? Intellectual property? David had answers for some, honest admissions of "I don't know yet" for others. Then the CFO spoke up. Let me get this straight. You want to save the company money while also providing flexible work opportunities for people who need them? Yes, David said simply. And you're willing to manage this on top of your current role? Yes, the CFO looked at the other executives. Sounds like a win-win to me. Let's pilot it. 3 months. 5 freelancers. Track the results. David felt something explode in his chest. Joy, relief, purpose. Thank you, he managed. I won't let you down. After the meeting, walking back to his office, David felt like he was floating. His boss caught up with him in the hallway. Congratulations. Now comes the hard part. Actually making it work. I know, but I'm ready. That evening, David called Lily. How would you like to be our first official freelancer? Her squeal of joy made him laugh. Really? Oh my God, really? Really. We'll need to work out details, rates, all that. But yeah, really. After he hung up, David sat in his office looking out at the city, the same view he'd had for 2 years. But everything looked different now. He thought about the wallet on his kitchen counter, the one he'd forgotten just over a week ago. Such a small thing, such a simple mistake, but it had cracked his life wide open. Sometimes, David thought, the best things happen when we lose control. When we're forced to slow down, ask for help, see the world differently. When we stop chasing success long enough to find meaning. His phone buzzed. A text from Walter. Heard you got your program approved. Proud of you, son. See you in the park? David smiled and texted back. Tomorrow. I'll bring the bread. The thread was pulling him forward now. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in years, David was excited to find out. Purpose felt good. Better than any promotion ever had. 6 months later, David stood in the same coffee shop where everything had changed. The tattooed guy, Tom, was still behind the counter, and David had learned he was actually studying music production at night school. Funny how you learn things about people when you actually talk to them. The usual? Tom asked with a grin. You know it. David paid for his coffee and left a generous tip. He did that now every time. Small acts of kindness rippling forward. He'd learned that from a girl named Lily, though she probably hadn't known she was teaching him anything. The freelance program had grown beyond anything David imagined. What started with 5 designers was now 23 freelancers across different specialties. Designers, writers, developers, all working on flexible schedules that let them care for kids, aging parents, or just have lives outside of work. Lily had been his first success story. Her designs had won the company 2 industry awards. More importantly, she'd been able to care for her mother, who was doing much better now. Last week, Lily had told David she'd never been happier, even though she made less money than a traditional full-time job would have paid. It's not about the money, she'd said. I mean, money matters, but this lets me be a daughter and a designer. I don't have to choose. David understood that now. The choosing. For years, he'd chosen career over everything else, over friendships, over hobbies, over any kind of life that wasn't about climbing the next rung. He'd thought that was what success looked like. He'd been wrong. His phone buzzed as he left the coffee shop. A text from Walter. Park today? David smiled and texted back. Wouldn't miss it. The park had become his sanctuary. 3 times a week, sometimes more, he'd meet Walter on that same bench. Sometimes they'd talk for hours. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence, feeding pigeons and watching the world go by. Walter had become something David never knew he needed. Not quite a mentor, not quite a friend. Something in between. A guide, maybe. Someone who'd walked the path David was just starting on and knew the turns to watch for. Today, Walter had news. He was moving to Florida to be closer to his daughter and grandkids. It's time, Walter said, scattering bread with practiced ease. I've been in Chicago for 50 years. Time for something new. David felt a pang of loss. I'm going to miss these talks. You don't need them anymore. You've found your thread. You're following it. That's all I could hope to teach you. You taught me more than that. You taught me to slow down, To see people. To ask what matters. Walter smiled, that warm smile David had come to love. You taught yourself all that. I just gave you permission to listen to what you already knew. They sat together as the afternoon sun painted the park in golden light. Office workers cut through on their way home. Parents pushed strollers. A group of teenagers laughed too loud about something only teenagers find funny. Can I tell you something? David said. That day I met you, when I first sat on this bench, I was so lost. I'd forgotten my wallet and it had cracked my whole life open. I didn't know what to do with all these feelings, these questions. And now I'm still figuring it out. But I'm not lost anymore. I'm searching, and that's different. Walter nodded. Being lost means you don't know where you are. Searching means you're choosing a direction. Big difference. David had been searching in a lot of directions lately. The freelance program was just one thread. He'd also started volunteering at a high school in an underprivileged neighborhood, teaching kids about marketing and business. Once a week, every Wednesday evening, he'd show up and help teenagers learn skills that might change their lives. Some of the kids reminded him of himself at that age, ambitious, hungry, convinced that success was the answer to everything. He tried to teach them what he'd learned, that success without purpose was just an expensive way to feel empty. One kid, a 17-year-old named Kevin, had really taken to the lessons. Last week, Kevin had told David he'd decided not to go into investment banking like he'd planned. Instead, he wanted to start a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to low-income families. I used to think being rich was the goal, Kevin had said. But you taught me that making a difference matters more. I can do both, right? Make money and make a difference? David had felt something shift in his chest hearing that. Pride, yes, but also hope. Hope that maybe the ripples spread farther than he could see. The freelance program had ripples too. Other companies had reached out, asking about the model. David had shared everything freely. No gatekeeping, no competitive advantage hoarding. 2 other companies in Chicago had started similar programs. One in New York was planning to launch next month. You're changing things, his boss had told him at his last review. Not just here, in the industry. But David didn't feel like he was changing anything. He just felt like he was finally paying attention, finally using his skills for something beyond profit margins and quarterly returns. His relationship with work had fundamentally shifted. He still worked hard, still cared about results, but work wasn't his life anymore. It was part of his life, a tool he used to create meaning, not an end in itself. He'd started painting again, something he'd loved in college but abandoned because it wasn't practical. Now, Saturday mornings were for terrible watercolors of the city. He was awful at it, but that wasn't the point. The point was creating something just for the joy of creation. He'd reconnected with old friends. Really reconnected, not just liking their social media posts. Jason and he had dinner every week now. They'd started a book club, just the 2 of them, reading and discussing books that made them think. David had even started dating. Nothing serious yet, but he was open to it in a way he hadn't been before. He'd met a woman named Angela at a volunteer event. She worked for a nonprofit that helped homeless veterans. They'd been on 3 dates, and David actually looked forward to seeing her instead of viewing it as another item on his schedule. She sounds special, Walter said when David mentioned her. Maybe. It's early, but for the first time in years, I'm not too busy for a relationship. I'm making space for it. Good. Life's too short to spend it alone in a corner office. Walter's pigeons had multiplied over the months, or maybe they were different pigeons. David couldn't tell. But they came like clockwork when Walter sat down, like they knew he'd have food and patience for them. Will you keep feeding them? Walter asked. The pigeons. When I'm gone. Every week, David promised. I'll bring bread and I'll sit here and I'll think about everything you taught me. Don't think about me. Think about yourself, about where you're going, about the difference you're making. Walter paused. Though I won't lie, it's nice to know someone will feed my birds. They talked until the sun started to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples. David told Walter about his plans. He was thinking of writing a book about the freelance program, about how companies could do well by doing good. He wanted to speak at conferences, share the model, inspire others to find their own threads of purpose. The marketing director who forgot his wallet, Walter said with a laugh. That's your origin story. I guess it is. Funny how life works. One mistake, one forgotten wallet, and everything changes.